Transition, the process of change from one condition to another.
We are now at a new crossroad where change is evident once again.
What does not serve us must transform us anew.
Returning to our original state of oneness and true nature of which created who we truly are.
Confusion was the way of the past. Enlightenment is the way of the now and future, shedding away the layers of deceit.
We now bring you the transformation of the two who started as one. Our fearless planet never stands still.
Earth has been in a process of transition, and we are not exempt from this remarkable, ongoing reality.
Well, hello and welcome to Transition Radio Show's Real Talk with the Cummings. My name is McCandless.
And I'm Lynna Ariel. Thanks, you guys, for joining us tonight on this wonderful, warm
Tuesday,
Arizona evening.
And we apologize ahead of time if the AC kind of makes sounds and stuff like that, but there's no way to be inside our home without that AC at 100 and something degree weather. Anyway, gosh. Life continues to get more and more interesting. Some of the news shows a lot of troubling behaviors from our leader. And I think I read something today that China had some more reoccurring cases and they're locking down again.
Yeah, there's all kinds of news out there from, our president saying that he's taking some kind of medication that he touts as being some kind of a help, when other organizations and, people that in the know are saying, please don't do it. Just like he said, drink Clorox or Lysol or whatever it is. He said, bleach, don't do it. If he says to do it, just don't. Do the opposite.
And that brings us to today's show, reality. It's a subjective endeavor. One of the things that I've noticed in the past few months since this whole change in the world is the questioning of what is real and what is not real. Who can you believe and who you cannot? And there's just like, I don't know if it's part of our awakening, part of our growth as spiritual being that we have to go through these, the walking of the shadow? There's a name for it.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, can't think of it.
It skips me.
It's part of the evolution that we are going through as a species, as individuals. And we have to be very careful what we ingest, what we believe, and what the motives are behind these theories, these conspiracies, these things that we're seeing.
Well, for so many years, we've been told a certain narrative to believe, a certain way of thinking that is based on this material reality, which has done everything to ignore the spiritual. But when the spiritual is presented, it's always presented in a way that's very segmented away from this material existence. So by disconnecting us from that connection that we have through the material into the spiritual, we kind of like separate things into two different categories.
Right.
And that's the title of our show. The coming together, the two will become one. Right. It's like the spiritual and the material will finally come back together.
And when we put that intro together, we were living in Silver City when you and I first met. And it was really, it just came. It was like this whole, I was writing it down, and and at first we kind of didn't really understand it. It sounded pretty cool, and the effects that you put together. It was pretty
deep,
yeah, and the effects you put together for the intro. So there's a lot in that intro that reveals a lot of what's going on.
I mean, I was very, like the place that I was in at the time was very contemplative and, just wondering about the nature of reality itself, after being in an accident and everything. What is real? What is true? What is, my belief system was cracked at that point. So
Exactly.
I was open, and I'm just glad that you wrote that, you know,
Yeah.
and that it just came to you.
Yeah,
And even like 5 years, 6 years later,
it's still very fitting.
it's very poignant.
Very poignant. You know, we have to understand that our consciousness does affect our reality and our gene expression. And this morning we watched a video from Bruce Lipton, very amazing scientist, I guess. He created the whole epigenetics theory, structure, whatever.
Which was being laughed about at the
Yeah.
time when he did come up with that theory. Basically the concept that we're not controlled by our genes, but there is another power that controls the genes, which is the epi, above the layer of the genes.
Just like the epidermis, your skin, you know, above your skin and things of that nature. I think that we have become so relaxed, sedentary, and taken what we have learned in the past, what we have been programmed to believe as truth and as the only reality. And the fact is, you know, that what can be real to you may not be real to me, or vice versa. And we have to look deeper than superficiality. So, you know, we looked at human behavior, and we know that it has some precipitated mass extinction. It's had 6 actually, you know, that we know of. And we're facing another irreversible collapse within the coming decades.
The Indians and the South Americans, people in South America, the Druids in Europe, all these people lived in this world of animism, which meant that the spirit and matter were one and the same, just like I was talking about earlier.
Right.
And that living on this planet, you would honor both the material realm and the spiritual realm. That story that we read about the Taino and the Ceiba tree, and going to visit the Ceiba tree. I don't know if you guys remember, we read this story a couple weeks ago, and it was basically, you know, this concept of the connection that, you know, what they would call primitive man had with the planet and with the different realms of existence.
Yeah. So, however, animism faded away as polytheism came into presence. And polytheism, such as the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptian, what they did, they actually took the spirit out of the individuals of the world as the animus sought, and the coalesced spirit into gods. In other words, they just like literally stripped us of our spirituality and replaced it with gods. And as we see in history, back in the day, there was a god for everything, when in reality, everything that you need is within you.
We were watching a video about the different gods of the Egyptians, and it's not just, you know, Ra and, you know, Set and Isis. I mean, they had a god for everything. And that is what we're talking about when we're talking about they deliberately, in this sense of like wanting to worship gods outside of themselves, polytheism, which is the worship of gods, multiple gods, they decided that they were going to pull the spiritual away from the material.
And they divided, you know, the church was responsible for the spirituality and science was responsible, like the Newton law, for the materialistic thing. When they divided, and that division didn't do us any good. And as a matter of fact, it did us a lot of harm. So,
facing the end of the current civilization of scientific materialism, a civilization has a life cycle like anything in the universe. A star is born, it matures and dies. People are born, mature, and they die. And so does a civilization. And as a civilization is created, the first phase is like that, what we're experiencing, life in a developmental phase, a developmental phase where we try all different kinds of things. We try them out. However, as we mature, we begin to have very rigid beliefs about how the way civilization and the universe works.
and it's what we have come to, you know, with religion, with science. This is the only way. And everybody has a rigid mentality, how they believe things should be. So what's happened is Newton laws are being replaced with quantum physics. And the reason is that Newton law, not that we have to get rid of it completely, but it's incomplete. So we've learned in that Darwinian theory, there's a character called survival of the fittest. We've heard of that before. In the competition for life, right? That's where we heard only the strong survive. That's what Darwinian thinks, that evolution was created based on that fact, which is not a fact at all. So it's a belief that animals reproduce faster than plants. Over time, there be more and more and more animals and less plants.
That means that competition are like whenever the animals get food, they can stay alive, and whichever animals that don't get food, they'll pass by the wayside. So it's this given belief, just like, Darwin would say, survival of the fittest, competition to survive on this planet. And the simple reality is that what makes our planet, it makes our planet a war zone, because then it takes away from the fact that the planet is not necessarily working together, but it's actually competing for resources against itself. And we all know now that that's not how things work, although that's how we've been told.
Yeah, and if you really think about it, if that was the case, many of us would not be here. It would have been a very limited amount of people. But yeah, you look around, we're overpopulated. So what helped us survive was being able to work together, just like the tribes work together. Just like you see ants crawling and they all work together as a team. You don't see one ant struggling with a big old load of whatever it is. No, it's a group of them. They work together. All right, guys, boom. And they take whatever it is into the queen ant's nest or whatever it is. Same thing with the bees and all the other animals in the animal kingdom. They work together. That's how you evolve. Not, I have an old saying, one hand washes the other. You can't wash your hand just with one. You need the other hand, as we need each other.
Freedom Grower joins us and he says, cheers, awesome beard, looks good.
Thank you, dude.
It gets everything.
I know when
he's eating, I have to constantly take a napkin or flip the food up out of his beard.
Yeah, I can hide things in there.
He's got quite the growth, and he says he wants it to come down.
Yeah, I'm not going to stop it. I won't let it grow. I'm also letting my hair grow. I don't know what's going to happen because I'm kind of bald up here, but I do want to let my hair grow. Just let it all hang out. Anyway, thank you for joining us, Freedom Grower. Hope all is well.
I was wondering about Freedom Grower.
Yeah, we haven't seen you for a while. So, let's see here. So, is competition the ground of the world in which we live? And the answer is absolutely not. Science has now recognized that it is a cooperation that drives evolution, the complete opposite. Rather than fighting with each other, our evolution is based on working together. So we are in a massive danger zone right now because we've been taught to compete, to tear our planet down, to become rich. And that is taking us into extinction.
I mean, even with this recent thing that's going on around the world, the president of the United States here is looking at it as some kind of competition, some kind of race to the top, as if, if we have so many tests, that we're like the lead on tests and stuff or something, and that's something to be proud of. And honestly, wouldn't it be a much better world if we were working together as a host of nations, as should be, instead of constantly pitting one over the other? I mean, I even heard that the federal government was actually bidding those things that the states needed away from the states in an era of this competition in order to take, to the highest bidder, goes the stuff. And it's like, why is this world set up this way?
It doesn't work because, in a team, you can't have all these star players wanting to do what they want. They have to work together as a team. When you're out at war, whether you're in the Marine, the Army, Air Force, you got to work together as a team or you will die.
There's everybody knows that a good NBA team, if it has a star player, the player can't carry the team on his back because basically if a great player were to be scoring a ton of points, say 60 points, and the rest of the team doesn't score any, they would still lose. You need a team in order to win. And I don't know what it is but we have this way of upending the environment now to seek out all the material wealth these days.
Mhm.
We've been mining the oceans and, for oil and fracking and destroying the environment. We've been cutting down trees and destroying the Amazon and other great biosphere areas of the planet. And we're just destroying the planet underneath our own feet. And we're not even living in harmony with a planet. We're actually destroying it. And now, as a result, we're facing an extinction.
Oh, I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just kind of like,
Okay.
we're facing an extinction. We're at this critical mass juncture where, they say by the year 2048, there won't even be saltwater fish in the seas.
No. So, what do we leave off here?
Yeah.
We have built a culture on these 4 beliefs, and these 4 beliefs are now patently incorrect. So to change our civilization, we have to now change our culture, our way of thinking, to accommodate the new insights about what we're here. Why we're here, the nature of our physical or energetic universe, the nature of genes. All of these things are up for a new reconsideration, a new look. And why this is so important, because how we adopt these understandings of nature is going to allow us to survive in the future. Yeah. People have been taught to fear a change. They've been taught to fear what they've called new order, and they think they could continue to take, live the way that they've been living and survive. And I truly believe that is not a way at all to survive. It actually is going to make us extinct. We're not working together. I mean, right now we see such division amongst humans, more so than ever. I don't ever recall in my 56 years of life seeing such competition, such animosity towards one another.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Those things that we thought were like principles of our existence, which is like, the ability to survive, and it's only fittest that make it. Now we know that it's those that adapt that actually survive. It's not those that that just make it because they're the strongest and fittest. I mean, it's because, like, when we went to Mount St. Helens and the mountain blew up and the volcano happened, loss of life, loss of environment and everything, the birds came together with the bears and the foxes and squirrels, and they all worked together symbiotically to remake the world that they lived in. And it wasn't like, the bear doing it by itself. It was the bird carrying the seed and the squirrel bearing it. And, it was this amazing connection and unity, like you see when you go outside and you see ants working together or bees building a hive. I mean, they're working for the good of the community of life.
Yeah, and we're not seeing that now more so than ever. We're seeing such division, such animosity, such competition, and that's going to be our destruction. We need to stop fearing and start trusting.
Those in the animist cultures of the past, where they believed in, the spiritual realm and the connection that they had with it, they understood things in a much deeper level. They understood things in a more, I guess, in a very much more like well-rounded way.
Exactly. Unlike now that everything is about the material, how much money you're going to make. It doesn't matter who you kill in the process or who dies in the process, because it's become all about the economy, about materialistic goods. And you have to understand that all it takes is the flare of the sun to wipe out the grid, and money is not going to be any good to any one of us. You can't eat it. You can't even wipe your you-know-what with it because it's kind of rough. So we either learn to work together and stop being so afraid and stop thinking that everyone's out to get you, the boogeyman, this conspiracy and that conspiracy. And trust me, I used to be there at one point in my life, but it's called growing and evolving and trusting and realize that we need one another. We need to stop this war that we have with one another.
So we understand how we're involved with this garden, this planet that we inherited, because there's still time for us to change the way we're living on this planet, to learn to live in harmony with nature and forestall the 6th mass extinction, but we're going to have to do it relatively soon, because this process is one of the most important things we're going to learn. And that's, there's more to humans than physical expression. We're more than our biology. We're more than DNA. We have this ability to be super amazing energy beings, which has been basically harnessed and hidden from us.
And that's, the Newton law, which made everything physical and forgot about the spiritual. They kind of let the church take the spiritual, but it's kind of like, take it over there. We really don't believe in it. Let them have their little philosophical stuff. But we need to combine it, the two becoming one. And we have to understand the whole cycle of life and learn from our mistakes, because we've been down this crossroad before. The ancient had it all together. We are really tearing it up right now, more so than ever. So
there's actually a spiritual component, and it's not a new age idea.
No, it's not. And it's founded in hard science, quantum physics, which is what has actually taken over, or like pushed the Newton law aside. The old system has structure. The new system has structure, but what's in the middle, as one is breaking down and a new one is forming, well, it would look like chaos, right? We see chaos. We see people walking in the street. If you had a drone or something and you go to New York, and before all this happened, you saw people going all over the place, it looks like there's complete chaos. But in that chaos, there is some sort of rhythm. It looks like the cells are randomly running all over the place and forming a new organism. And the fact is, they're very specifically forming a new structure as the old one is coming down. So what we're seeing happen today, which we think it's random, we think it's just, how did this happen? It's actually happening for a reason.
I mean, the planet is really expressing itself. Volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, different things that are happening. The fires in Australia, for example, and all these different. I mean, events. Even like in the north, when we were traveling, we had to watch where we would go because there were wildfires all over the place. And it's not that it's a chaotic mess that's happening. It's the planet giving us a warning, and it's telling us this age, this time is going to come to an end, and we're going to begin a new beginning. Exactly. We're going to start over. And it's like a caterpillar, it's a very voracious organism. It'll eat up all the leaves on the plant that it's growing on, and once it destroys its own environment, it goes into what's called the pupa stage and into chrysalis. And in the chrysalis, it's the beginning of the formation and transformation from a caterpillar into a butterfly.
The caterpillar has structure, a butterfly has structure, but if you cut open a pupa, what would you see? A random mass of cells. At least it appears random, but it's not. Why some cells are breaking down from the old caterpillar structure and some cells are building up.
So the new butterfly structure in the middle is the pupa, and that is symbolic of chaos, right? We think chaos has no purpose, but chaos has purpose because it's in the beginning of the beginning of the new stage and the culminating of the old stage. So what may look like random bits and parts to you, to me, if we look at it closely, we can understand that there is purpose in the chaos. So it's not just random.
It's not. And, nature has, if you look closely to nature, you can see that taking place in just about everything. When there's a fire, nature creates that fire to create new seedlings, to create new growth.
Civilization is destroying itself, just like the voracious caterpillar. We're basically in caterpillar destruction stage is what we're doing. We're eating up the leaf, which is planet Earth. We're basically eating it up, and that is what's taking place right now. That's
exactly. And this process, we're pushing it to the very edge, which is causing what a time for transformation. We have to move from the caterpillar stage of human civilization into the lighter touch of the butterfly. Human civilization, the butterfly stage of human civilization. Well, where are we we're not in the butterfly phase yet, and we're still following the collapse of the caterpillar stage. It is in a state of chaos, moving from non-sustainable civilization into one that we can thrive into the future.
So it's basically saying that in this stage of chaos that we're in, which is what we're, you look around you, you see this is what's taking place. Mm-hmm. This, what looks like chaos, what looks like random, uncontrollable spasms that the earth is going through is really this beautiful, wonderful day of reckoning, which is not just a day of reckoning of like judgment, but it's like this day of reckoning, which means that we are going to finally be able to deal with what we've done on this planet. We are the ones that have caused this sixth state of mass extinction. I mean, before 62 million years ago, it was a comet that landed somewhere in Mexico, a meteor that blew up and destroyed the planet, life as we know it.
A dinosaur, to be exact.
Right. Yeah. But now, in the last 200 or 300 years, 200, 150, we're the ones who've been destroying it.
Yeah, we've been the one that's responsible. And we don't even see it because we're so mesmerized by the material world, by money, by things that really have no value, because you can't take it with you when you go. Gold, bonds, anything like that, you can't eat. And how much value does that stuff really have? What's really valuable is food, shelter, and community. And we're pushing all that aside.
The ancients, not so long ago, 500 years ago, when Columbus came to our native islands in the Caribbean, they basically didn't put any value in gold. They didn't think it was of any, it was symbolically, something to them, but it wasn't a value thing. It wasn't like, something to be melted and possessed and it was something that was a part of nature, and it was used in ceremony and things like that, but it was no more valuable than anything else that they would like the yucca plant or something, or certain animals that they would eat. I mean, it was this connection with the planet that didn't put value in the things of the planet, but knew that they were like stewards of the planet.
Right. And they didn't mine it. They didn't do what the Europeans have done with everything in this world. They destroyed their world and came here, and now they've destroyed this one. And it's just, we really have to think about what really matters. We've been given a tremendous opportunity right now to hit that reset button, to think, to go within, yet we're fighting to continue for the old system, the system that has destroyed it all, the system that made man and women go crazy based on materialistic good, based on things that really don't matter.
And now they
say hi. Dylan joined us, and Marcy joined us a little while ago. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, you guys, for coming on. Now they want to mine the moon. The president wants to put resources on the moon to mine it. And it's like, when is enough enough? Do you think that the planet and the universe is going to allow for mankind to do its pilfering and destruction? It won't.
Yeah, it's beyond me. And, the good news is I think a lot of people are waking up. There's been a trend for a while where people are becoming minimalist. You need certain things in life, and I think you need a lot less than what we're actually consuming and doing. And once you stop that programming that's been set there, I know many parents have set that programming instead of giving their children love, attention, and raising them to be good human and honest human beings. They've actually used material things to show what love is. And that's not love. That's just buying them things because you can't give your kids the value of time and unconditional love that you're supposed to give your children. We watched a movie called Into the Wild a while back, and we've been revisiting the movie. And the links of what we spoke about is down in the description, and also the Into the Wild Part 2, I guess, would be like a little documentary the sister made. It's called something else, but
It's actually Back to the Wild.
Back to the Wild,
and it was a PBS
special.
that came out. The book that she did was another book that she did. Back to the Wild was done by PBS.
Right. Explaining, the reason why, there's a lot of people speculated why the brother went and did what he did. They thought he was crazy, just entitled, bratty kid that just wanted to rebel, and that was farthest from the truth. I think we all have this inner feeling of wanting to find ourselves one way or another, and not really placing values on things that have been placed there, not by our own accord, but by other people, teacher, preacher, mother, father. And they're really not your own thoughts. They're really not your own values, is what you've been taught. And so I believe that we all go through this stage where we want to find ourselves and start to realize that the world that we're living in is not really reality. That's a reality that's been placed there by others for you.
I don't think some of the people even know the book necessarily. So if we just wanted to break into some of the story and stuff like that, what exactly was it about?
Well, it's this young man. Turned out that he had a very troubling childhood because he was raised with very abusive parents. He had a sister that he felt very responsible for to protect her. And, typical middle class, up there, probably a little bit more than middle class.
His dad was a rocket scientist,
NASA,
and worked with NASA. And he had actually, this was like his second marriage. So he already had kids and everything. And he left the previous marriage and the children and basically went to be with his new family. And the children are raised in this really weird kind of scenario where, they would get together with the other kids from the other family and stuff. But a lot of times what was happening in the home didn't reflect the great times that they were having out in nature when they would go travel and stuff like that. He was, the father was very physically abusive.
And he was pretty much like an alcoholic, and drank and abused both wives. And the children also, experienced a lot of emotional abuse. And I think a lot of us could relate with that. And I think there was something in that time period where there was a lot of that going on, in families. And that just kind of made him, when he graduated from college, it just made him want to just take off and leave and find his true identity. He found that the family lied a lot. They were churchgoers and, pretended to be this perfect family, and it was all based on lies. And I think a lot of us can relate to that too. Our families want to create this facade, but deep down inside they're lying. And that creates a lot of confusion and creates a lot of imbalance within ourselves. So he went
off on a journey, basically of self-actualization. He wasn't really trying to be like some kind of nature lover type, living off the land, kind of Bear Grylls type, extreme survivor mentality. He just wanted to find truth. He wanted to know what it was to be honest and to meet honest people and to live a clean life and to have simple friends that didn't expect him to have money and wealth and fame and things like that. He burned his money, burned his credit cards, he burned his Social Security card.
Yeah.
He burned his money.
He
had a trust fund of $24,000 after he graduated from Emory University down in Georgia. And he gave his parents his diploma and his degree, and he said, I'm going on a journey.
And he donated that money to a charity cause. So, he realized that life wasn't all about money, because all that money that his father had and his family, he saw that there was no happiness to that at all. And so he wanted to find himself. He wanted to self-actualize without the noise of the world, which is what we all tend. We think we get a degree, we start working, we work a 9-to-5 job, and we think that is happiness. We think that, really makes us a person, and actually that's death. So living to die. What was it? He wrote something on on this thing. He
Oh
lit
gosh, but that's
something.
very deep.
Yeah.
I can't really go into that.
Yeah, but anyway, the link is there. Into the Wild is the original movie and book. Sean Penn was on and directed it, and very great movie. And I think it's very fitting to the times that we're in, because I think a lot of us are trying to really find ourselves, or have been trying to find ourselves for the longest time. And I have to say that if you're trying to find yourself in a diploma, in a label, or a career choice, or how much money you make, or what kind of car you drive, you're never going to find it. It's going to give you temporary happiness. And in the end, you're going to realize that you wasted your time and you're still dead inside.
And you're not being selfish if you don't want to fulfill the plans and roles that your parents have for you. Because a lot of times, I know I grew up in an era where my parents didn't have much when they were growing up, and they defined their value and their worth with being able to be successful and to be able to make it, well, quote unquote, live the American dream, right? And
Or the nightmare.
yeah, and basically get in debt, have a lot of credit cards, and pretend to be like better than the Joneses around you and stuff. And the reality is that it's okay not to care about that kind of stuff. It's okay not to put emphasis and to feel bad that you don't want to share the same, ideology as your parents do. And this can be a family that was brought up in a Christian home. I mean, Christianity teaches selflessness and giving and loving others unconditionally. But so many times you find it in Christian households that they define your worth by the success by your ability to be independent, your ability to, not depend on the state. And, it's so anti what Jesus would have taught in reality.
Or, Jesus is just an avatar of
Well,
many.
in the Bible.
Yeah, in the Bible of many, because there have been many. Buddha, even what's his name, who got killed, Gandhi, who was raised very affluent. He was an attorney, or, he became affluent, and he let it all go just to, follow his heart and follow the path of truthness, of the real reality, not this make-believe reality that we have created.
Dylan says, damn, the dude went all out.
Well, when you're really trying to find yourself, you have to step away from the status quo, from the same old, from what we've been programmed to believe. And that's the only way you're really going to, get to know what reality really is. You can't just continue to follow the same 9-to-5 job, the same dead rhythm, that has been given to us generation to generation.
Yeah, his name is Chris McCandless, and he basically took, no caution. He didn't want to have a plan. It was the era before the iPhones and, any text messaging or anything like that. So it was, 1990, I think it was, that he left, and he was gone for like 2 years, lived, just day to day, working, hiking, working when he needed to, helping people out, and, endeared himself to certain people around him as he traveled and everything, and made a real impact on a lot of people's lives in the short amount of time that he did live. He eventually did die, though. He was out in the
let's not ruin it for them. But
we know that.
Yeah. But it's a really good documentary movie, actually, and I think during this time the movie has a lot of. It really connects with a lot of people that don't want to follow the status quo, and people that really care about the planet and about each other. So Marcy says, I'm grateful for this downtime we have gotten. It's given me time to work on myself and think. At first I was upset because I had a lot lined up. I was excited about, but I've needed this time to myself. Yeah, it's so important to meditate, to take walks, out in nature, and just really reset, look at things differently. So we also watched this really amazing TED Talk, and we have a transcript here, and we wanted to share this with you. It's called What Ancient Civilization Teaches About Reality. because we think our reality is the only reality. The reality that we see here in this world today, president, corporations, banks, the way life is running. We think that's real. That's the only reality there is. But we forget that our civilization is what? A few hundred years,
Yeah.
if that.
250 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, the American experiment
Yeah,
is
it's pretty much
years
it.
old.
It's an experiment. So in the next few minutes, we hope to change the way you think about the very nature of reality itself. Okay, so this guy, he's no physicist, and he's not even a philosopher. He's a historian, and he studied ancient Greeks, and many other pre-modern people.
Now, of course, you and I here today, we take it for granted that there's just one ultimate reality out there. Our reality is a fixed, universal world experienced, ruled by timeless laws of science and nature. But we want you to see things differently. We want you to see that humans have always lived in a pluribus society of many, many different worlds, not in a universe of just one. And if you're willing to see this, this plurality of many worlds, it will fundamentally change the way you think about the human past and hopefully the present and the future.
So as well now, let's get started by asking 3 basic questions about the contents of our reality and real world that you and I share right here, right now. First of all, what is it that makes something real in our real world? Well, for us, real things are material things made of matter that we can somehow see, like atoms, people, trees, mountains, planets. By the same token, invisible, immaterial things like gods and demons, heavens and elves, these are all considered unreal. They've simply believed subjectively. They're beliefs in subjective ideas that exist only in the realm of the mind.
To be real, a thing must exist objectively in some visible form, from whether our minds can perceive it or not. Second, what are the most important things in our real world? Answer things like people, cities, societies, cultures, governments, economies. Why is this? Well, because we humans think we're special. We think that we're the only creatures on the planet who have things like language, reason, free will.
By contrast, non-human things to us are just part of nature, a mere backdrop to human culture, a mere environment of things that we feel entitled to use however we want. And third, what does it mean to be human in our real world? Well, it means being an individual, a person who lives ultimately for oneself. We think nature has made us this way, giving each and every one of us all of the reasons, the right freedom, and the self-interest to thrive and compete with other individuals for all of life's important resources.
But I'm suggesting to you that the real world of ours is neither timeless nor universal. It's just one of countless different real worlds that humans have experienced in history. What then would another world look like? Well, let's look at what the real world of the classical Athenians in ancient Greece looked like. Now, of course, we usually know the Athenians as our cultural ancestors, pioneers of our Western traditions, philosophy, democracy, drama, and so forth. But their real world was nothing like ours.
So Athenians was alive with things that we would consider material and thus unreal. It pulsated with things like God, spirit, nymphs, fate, curses, earth, souls, and all kinds of mysterious energies and magical forces. Indeed, the most important thing in very real world were not humans at all, but God. Why? Because gods were awesome, literally. They control all the things that made life possible: sunshine, rainfalls, crops, harvest, childbirth, personal health, family, wealth, sea voyages, battlefields, victories. There were over 200 gods in Athens, and they were not remote, detached divinities watching over human affairs from afar.
They were really there immediately. They were an experience living in temples. They attended sacrifices, mingling with the Athenians at their festivals and banquets and dances. And in the real world of the Athenians, humans did not live apart from the from nature. Their lives were dictated by the rhythms of the seasons and by the life cycles of crops and animals. Indeed, the land of the Athenians itself was not just a piece of property or territory. It was a goddess, a living goddess that had once given birth to the first Athenians and had nurtured and cared for and all of their descendants ever since, with their precious gifts of soils and water, stone and crops. Indeed, if anything should pollute her soils with unlawful bloodshed, it had to be expelled immediately beyond her boundaries.
Whether it was a man, an animal, or just a fallen roof tile, and in the real world of Athenians, there were no individuals at all. Athenians were inseparable from their families, and all Athenian families were expected to live together and work together as a single body, like cells of a living organism, which is how it's meant to be. They called this social body simply demos.
The people, demos, and they called their way of life demokrata. But it was nothing like our modern democracy, you know, the liberate me, freedom, individualism thing going on now. Because Athenians were not born to be individuals living for themselves. They were born to serve and preserve their families and the social body that had given them life in the first place.
So in some of the whole Athenians' way of being, human was radically different from our own nature. Had programmed them to live as one, as a unitarian social body, and it had designed them expressly to coexist and collaborate with all manner of non-human beings, especially their gods and their divine Earth Mother. Life in Athens was thus sustained by what we can call a cosmic ecology, a symbiotic ecology of God's mother, land, and people.
Now, of course, to us today in a real world, quote unquote, we look at their real world, and well, it looks strange, it looks weird, bizarre, exotic. You know, you look at those Aesop's fables and those, you know, Greek mythology stories, and people think, oh, that really didn't happen. That was just in their mind. Things in common with the real world experienced by numerous other pre-modern peoples, including, for example, the ancient Egyptians, ancient Chinese, and the peoples of pre-colonial Peru, Mexico, India, Bali, Hawaii, and all those pre-modern worlds. Gods, even in our Taino culture, Yokahu was the god.
Yeah.
You know, they controlled all the conditions of existence. And non-humans were always expected to collaborate with humans, and vice versa.
And humans were expected to serve their communities, not to live for themselves. Unlike now, I mean, look around us. Americans think that they're the biggest and greatest and best, and they, you know, it's like war and division. So as individuals, indeed, in the grand scheme of history, it's our real world, our reality that is the great exception. Okay? It was never this way before. To the rule, the exotic one, the strange one, only in our real world is reality itself a purely terrestrial order. Only in our real world are non-humans always subordinate to humans, and only in our real world are humans born to be individuals.
I think it was tyrannical.
Tyrannical.
It's a tyrannical order.
Right.
The order that we live in now is tyrannical.
And yet we're fighting that, you know, it's like an oxymoron. You know, this individuality that many of you are fighting for is actually the tyranny, and you don't even see it.
Only in our real world are humans born to be individuals. That's our quote-unquote real world.
Right.
Why this uniqueness? Well, because our real world was shaped and forged in a unique environment, a historically unprecedented environment in early modern Europe. And let's say that again, modern Europe, with its scientific revolution, its enlightenment, its novel experimental capitalist way of life. Yet despite this uniqueness, we just take it for granted that our reality is the one true reality. It certainly sounds exactly like modern Christians saying that, you know, their way is the only way. Their beliefs are the only way.
So let's see what
Dylan says, getting yelled at for not accepting religious truth, quote unquote, is not the canon God that we do often hear about. It's funny how everyone in my family can have conversations about their beliefs, but if I want to explain mine, it's wrong and worthy of debate, not worthy of debate, and everyone is suddenly exasperated with me. Makes no sense.
And that's exactly, what we're talking about here. It's like, if we as individuals dare to question the non-reality, because it's not reality, we've made it reality, but it's not, then all heck breaks loose. And we're called all sorts of names. We're like going against the status quo.
What the president is doing in this country is, we see flags flying out of trucks, hanging out of houses, on flagpoles and everything. But the symbol of this American spirit, to me, has now taken like the feel of more like a racism, more like this is essentialism, this fierce independence, not for the good of anybody, but looking out for number one, looking out for the individual. It's like, it's my right. I don't have to wear a mask if I'm in public if I don't want to. And it's like, instead of thinking about the whole group, I mean, you think about
the well-being of others.
Yeah. People think about the well-being of themselves.
Right. So that we believe that our reality is the one true reality, that all humans in history have lived in only our real world, whether they knew it or not. Just think of this for a moment. The colossal arrogance of this assumption. Basically, we're saying we modern Westerners are right about reality, and everybody else in all of history is wrong. Basically, we're saying that all of those extraordinary civilizations of the past were really just lucky accidents, because they were all founded on nothing more than myth, illusion, and false idea about reality.
Why are we so certain that we're right? Why do we just take it for granted that we know more? Why we struggle to take seriously the real worlds of the pre-modern peoples? Well, because we think our modern sciences provide the only true objective knowledge of reality. But do they? For more than 100 years now, the very idea of objective reality has been seriously and continually questioned by experts in many fields, from physics and biology to philosophy. Basically, these experts would suggest that our reality is not simply a material order given to us by nature. It is something that humans actively participate in.
Producing when their minds interact with their environment, there's a way to think about it in order to make sense of experience. Every people in the past, in effect, had to devise a model of real world. They would then use that model as the basis for their whole way of life, all of its practices, its norms, values. And if that way of life proved to be successful, in practice sustainable, then the truth of the model would be confirmed by the evidence of everyday experience.
It worked, and thus, once the model became internalized in the mind and baked into the environment, in the effect of a stable real world, it would be generated by ongoing interactions between the two, between minds on the one hand, environments on the other. Let's take a quick example. Why are we so convinced that in our modern world that we're all ultimately natural individuals? Well, because a bunch of social scientists in early modern Europe decided that we were. And because their model of a world full of natural competitive individuals became the basis for a new capitalist way of life, that generated unprecedented levels of wealth, at least for the lucky few. And because all of us have been raised in capitalist nations ever since, having been continually socialized to be individuals by our families, our schools, and our societies, and because we're treated precisely as individuals almost every day of our lives.
So you think about it, we've been programmed from a very young age to think socialism bad, to think capitalism good, to think you're an individual, you have to compete, you have to this, and that's all you know. But this is a very short-lived reality. It hasn't been that way for long periods of time. We would have not survived. So let's see, we're treated precisely as individuals almost every day of our lives by the structure which control those lives, like our liberal democracy and our capitalist economy. And remember, the word democracy doesn't mean what we think it means. You know, as we said earlier, it was like a union, people doing things together, a community. So, other words, our minds in our environment continually conspire to make our individuality seem entirely natural. And some, no human beings have ever experienced a truly objective reality. Different people have always experienced different realities, each one shaped by whatever model of the world happened to be embedded in minds and environment at the time. In other words,
Humans have always lived in a plurality of many different real worlds, not in a universe of just one. Let me close with 3 thoughts that follow from this conclusion. First of all, we modern Westerners, we need to stop thinking that all pre-modern peoples are somehow a more primitive or less enlightened group than ourselves.
their real world with all their gods and magical forces were just as real as our own. Indeed, those real worlds anchored ways of life that sustained real lives of multitudes for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years.
Their real worlds were different. They were not wrong. And second, we modern Westerners need to get over ourselves. We need to be a little more humble for all of its extraordinary technological accomplishments. Our brave new modern real world has imperiled the whole future of the planet in barely 300 years. It's made possible all manner of historical, the horrors of genocidal, horrors that historically have never been seen on this planet.
So we've colonized, exploited people, industrial servitude to the disastrous world wars, the Holocaust, nuclear warfare, species extinction, environmental degradation, factory farming, and of course, global warming. We're, 65% of our species have been lost,
Animal species.
Yeah.
And 75% of insects.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy. We are literally destroying ourselves. So
The evidence is there if you want to see it. Our model of reality has failed catastrophically. In practice, third, other models and other real worlds are possible. Other worlds are being lived right now as we speak in. What remains of history's plurality of places like the Amazon, the Andes, southern Mexico, northern Canada, Australia, and all other places where indigenous peoples are struggling to preserve their highly sustainable ancestral ways of life.
To prevent them from being destroyed by modern world, every expanding universe, I suggest that all of these non-modern peoples, past and present, have so much to teach us about living more sustainable lives in other possible worlds. So let's start right now to try to learn from them before it's too late. Let's try to magnify our imagination. Let's start to imagine other possible ways of being human in other possible worlds. Because the way we're living now just does not work. It really doesn't work.
It really is a very sobering thing to realize that those that lived before lived smarter on this planet. They lived more efficiently on this planet. They lived more respectfully on this planet. This planet was a more beautiful place to live on in the past.
Definitely.
Things weren't owned. Things were respected. Things were protected.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, oh, let's just separate a little area called a national park and put it, out of the ability for people to put houses on it and stuff like that. It was like the entire planet was something that everybody wanted to take care of.
Right. And, there were people, that's the garden, gardener is what the natives consider themselves as because they tended to the planet. We're just joining it. We're just joining it just to get another toy, just to get another gadget, constantly consuming. Remember, every time you consume something had to be destroyed for your consumption. The whole concept of people outdoing one another by building up their bank account while people are slaving away. You call it a job. I call it slavehood. Because when you're working 9 to 5 and you're getting a set amount of wages, let's say $10, $15 an hour, that company you're working for is making a heck of a lot more. And you're being used and abused, as is the planet. I mean, somehow, how can we live like that? How can we live with that kind of reality?
Dylan says, I'm having difficulty existing with my family now. I can't imagine how people back then could deal with it. But I always also can relate in some way, having never lived with any other people or had a chance to live on my own.
Yeah, it's, I think that's why that guy, Chris from Into the Wild, decided he needed to leave. He couldn't stay there. He couldn't continue to be poisoned by his parents, by society. And it's people close their eyes to what's taking place because we think that that's the way it is. That's the way it's always been. And that's a lie. It has not always been that way. This is just this modern experiment that we are definitely going through. So let's see here. I'm trying to figure out this.
I don't think you can do that.
No.
What is that?
It's a book, and it talks about.
It doesn't usually give it all the pages.
No. I wanted to just go through a few of the things. We look at the Bible and we think the Bible is everything, but there's so many books that have been written. Many have been burnt, because hidden because the Catholics, Christians wanted to only show the world what their reality was, and they pushed everything else aside, calling them ignorant, But you got the Vedas. They were not written down on palm leaves and other such items until about 6,000 years ago. They were passed from teacher to students by chance. These teachers or inspired seers and other such beings were not humans as we know humans, but superhumans from another planet and another dimension. Their DNA is much more complicated than the fantastic than ours, and fantastic that are ours, which includes their earthborn descendants like King Pandu, ancient king of Hastinapur, India, And we hear these things and we think, oh, this can't be true, or it's mythological, but yet we believe the Bible. A man with a boat floating had a, so it's like we have this selective reality, what we feel is real or not,
These chants, along with the necessary incantations, are considered by Hindus to be divine revelations. They are a system of education passed down by the rishis to their students and propagated from one generation to the next. In other words, the information was passed down by sound vibrations, the same kind of vibrations, hymns that the Veda is written in, and the same kind of vibrations in these chants could alter their DNA. These rishis or sages were also known as deities, presiding over procreation and the protection of life on this planet.
Notice that a lot of these individuals, everything was about protecting the planet. I think we are the first species that's living in this modern time. We don't protect the planet, we destroy it.
Right, we're consumers.
Materialism, The Sanskrit word vimana has several meanings. Two such meanings are he who is able at 3 strides to take measures of the earth and heaven, and anything that flies from one place to another. The history of these astonishing beings chronicled in the Vedas may seem a bundle of contradictions, but they are held together by a strong, though invisible, thread.
The Vedas are our most ancient scriptures tell us that there are living entities everywhere in this universe, even on our sun. The opinion of Earth scientists is that this is nonsense, that there is no life on the sun. However, according to the Vedas, every atmosphere is suitable for life. Any atmosphere. Therefore, the Vedas describe living entities as existing in any circumstance.
It tells us that a living entity is not material, but only living in a material body, and that in different atmosphere, there are different material conditions. The living entity cannot be burnt, cut, dried up, or moistened. This is referenced in the Bhagavad Gita, the ancient Sanskrit text that is part of the Mahabharata, the fifth book of the Vedas. Many yogis say, how can earth scientists comprehend the depth of an ocean if they think like a frog living trapped in a well? That's a good one.
Yeah. According to Dr. V. Raghavan, retired head of the Sanskrit department of India's prestigious University of Madras, was alone in playing host to extraterrestrials in prehistory. Dr. Raghavan contends that centuries-old documents from the Vedas prove that aliens from outer space world visited this nation, his nation, India.
Disagreements among the gods, demigods, giants, and other conflicts of wars of gods and demigods and men of renown are also contained in this story. What some might call the lost history of us, the root ET races and humans, or the middle-sized child of carbon-based human beings. The Vedas include a large body of such knowledge texts considered to have come not from man, but from Superman. And it's really interesting because you look at a lot of the mythology, you look at a lot of the writings, the frequency, the sounds, the vibration, how things got transmitted from one tribe to another, not so much in written work, but, you know, the vibration, the sounds. You look at the Buddhists, how they chant and certain sounds create certain things. And we're just, you know, we've been made to believe this little reality, this little boxing reality, which is, it's so minute, you know, compared to what's really out there, what really is reality.
Yeah.
You know, so let's see here. So, I mean, this is like really, really interesting stuff. Right.
The Rishis of the ancient Vedas knew many things. For example, that the core of creation was represented by the sound Om, and that the positive light that is emanated from fire rituals could create universal harmony. Rishis are sages who, after intense meditation, realized the supreme truth and eternal knowledge, which they composed into hymns.
They use their spiritual powers to transform themselves into different kinds of beings. Rishi Marika, for example, one of 10 sons of Brahma, in the Ramayana, ancient Vedic story of Rama, had himself changed into a deer. Hanuman, a fusion deity of 3 different dimensions in the form of monkey man, and a fervent devotee of Rama, 7th avatar of Vishnu, and prince and king of Ayodhya, believed by many to be a supreme being in the Trinity that includes Brahma and Shiva, could instruct his body to become as big as a mountain or small as an ant, heavy as a mountain or light as a feather. And we see a lot of the drawings in the past, and we see a lot of the mythological information that depicts this. But yet we think, oh, that's not real. What's only real is what the Bible says, you know?
Coordinated changes in DNA based on exchange of information, interacting and corresponding to and with its surroundings can also create different species. And by the way, there is no such thing as junk DNA. Simply because there are those who don't understand something marvelous does not make it junk. It appears that 98% of DNA that modern scientists did not understand creates a sort of biological internet communicating via light and sound waves.
Another part of the Veda history that occurred not long before the aliens left was the Kurukshetra atomic war. It involved a number of ancient kingdoms participating as allies of rival factions. It was a struggle between 2 groups of cousins in Kauravas and the Pandavas, aliens and descendants of aliens born on Earth. And it seems to me, and in every story from the Veda to whatever it is, Sumerian tablets to the Mayans, it all speaks of aliens. And it all speaks of the ability to do things that we've been dumbed down now that we are not capable of doing.
Yeah, and for those that really, you know, kind of like, oh yeah, aliens, whatever. If you grew up in a Christian home, you believe in an alien God. You know, you believe in a person who came to this planet from another place. You know, I mean, so it's not so far-fetched as one would want to think of it. You know, it's not so woohoo crazy talk, you know, because that is the same thing. Extraterrestrial, not of this world.
Even your Jesus.
Right.
You know, I consider Jesus a time traveler, an interdimensional being. You know, this is a war for your spirit, and there are many species out there. And a lot of what we don't understand is based on this war, is based on the division, on the individuality that they're trying to program us to believe so that we don't remember who we truly are and where we've come from. So, yeah.
It's a very interesting article. I'm going to read that entirely later.
Yeah.
But it's a really, really interesting to know that there are other books out there that record events and things that have happened in our species of development as humans that have contributed to the way we are now.
Exactly. And we just, you know, we can't just go pro-wrote what we've been taught and programmed to be reality, because it's just subjective. It is what your grandfather, great-grandfather has taught you. Those that came from Europe and colonized here and pushed their beliefs on the natives. And there's just, this world is so many years old compared to the limited amount of years that Christianity has been around. And
Darcy joins us.
Hey, Darcy.
Hi, Darcy.
So yeah, that is a very interesting article, honestly.
I'll read it to you during
Yeah.
dinner preparation.
Yeah. So, and then, you know, you got Plato, the theory of knowledge and philosophy. I mean, Plato actually, you know, the whole concept of the cave, you know, describes a scene of prisoners seated in a dark cave facing a wall from birth. The prisoners have never seen anything except shadows. I mean, that was their reality. You know, reality is where you were raised and what you were taught, right? If the prisoners could turn around, they would see puppeteers with props and fire behind that. In the example, the puppeteers are using the fire to produce shadows on the wall of the captive prisoners.
Plato states that to them, reality is just a shadows thrown onto the wall, because that's all they have ever and will ever know. Another vision was about a prisoner being released, describes how his movements would suffer, his eyes would suffer, and his body would suffer, not only emotionally, but physically. All the evidence I gather from the cave makes it seem like Plato thought most of humanity was living in a cave, in the dark, and very limited in knowledge, being bound to bare minimum, and that with new knowledge and to gain this new information is basically humanity being rescued from darkness.
He put it this way: the conversion of the soul in the readiest way, not to put the power of sight into the soul's eyes, which already has it, but to ensure that indeed of looking in the wrong direction, it is turned that way it ought to be. To Plato, the rest of humanity was basically these tied up people. Gaining true knowledge to common people would be the same as letting one man out of the cave, potentially dangerous and also free at the same time. So it's like, you know, we have to understand that the world that we're living in is not the way the world has been forever. That this whole capitalistic, materialistic way of living is toxic. And if we continue to live this way, we will become extinct.
Well, one way to look at it is to, you know, recall how you feel when you go watch a movie at the theater. You know, you get involved in a Netflix series like we have been, El Dragon. We have been absolutely entrenched in it. Other people could be Tiger King or something else that they might be hooked on. Right now it's El Dragon for us, but we think that these things are real for a moment, you know, and that's the kind of sense of non-reality that we actually do live in, because this world is a stage and every one of us are players, actors, and we're playing a role on this planet. You know, and you know, we're only allowed to see just like the spectrum of sound and you know, light is very limited to human abilities. A camera can see more than we can.
Exactly.
You know, there's a new camera, I guess, that came out supposedly has X-ray capabilities.
Oh, wow.
So they're trying to change it so that the phone doesn't get used to shoot x-ray pictures of people.
That's crazy.
You know, but technology itself has more advanced abilities to see light than we do. You know, their dogs can hear frequencies that we can't hear. Cats can see, and birds can see things that we can't see. So it's really amazing to think that, you know, just because we say something is what it is that we're not seeing the full picture.
Right. And it's interpretation, it's perception, it's what filter were you given. And these filters literally are taught from a very young age, and you see the world through this filter. But in reality, you know, that's not really reality. And here is like this, it has different thing. What is the nature of reality? And they have all these different people talking about it. So in discussing the nature of reality, we must distinguish between physical reality and immaterial, non-physical reality. Physical reality is that which is constrained by physics or physical laws. Perhaps the best person to relegate this part of the discussion would be a physicist, since a physicist is probably more qualified in discussing physical reality than an armchair philosopher.
You know, one of the things that Newton had to come to terms with the church was that in his discovery of all these physical laws and things, gravity being one of them, that he was not, because they were painting him as a heretic, and he was trying to protect himself, his life actually, because at that world, that in the world that he was living in, the church ran reality as everyone knew it. And, you know, there were certain things that he was going to have to compromise and say, you know, I won't go into the immaterial world. I won't go into, you know, studying about the spiritual, you know, dimensions and stuff. I'll just keep it on the physical. Is that okay, church?
Right.
And the church acquiesced and let him do that, you know, because they're like, oh, that immaterial world, that's our world. You leave that alone. That's how we control everybody. So, you know, immaterial reality then pertains to what is not constrained by physical laws. Example, concepts such as character and the mind. Plato's forms the realm of gods and spirits. If physical reality is all that is real, then what is the relationship of immaterial concepts such as character, the good and morals to this physical reality?
Are concepts such as these just the content of our brain and products of our reasoning and emotions? If so, then it is probable these concepts are just subjective and thus not absolute, since the contents of our belief is contingent and always changing. I want to take this time for all you that are watching. It says we have 133 watching right now. Please take your time to subscribe, hit the notification button so you can keep up with our podcast. So I lost myself. If so, then it's probable these concepts are just subjective and thus non-absolute, since the contents of our belief is contingent and always changing.
Conversely, if there is a separate and distinct non-subjective immaterial reality, and the aforementioned concepts of character, the good, and morals, etc., exist as aspects of this reality, then the existence of objective absolute concepts is possible, maybe even necessary, since the nature of reality is not contingent, dependent on subjective opinion.
So on the other hand, right, some questions now arise. If immaterial reality does exist as separate and distinct from physical reality, how would these two realities interact? Is there a distinct location for an immaterial concept or a form or spirit in somewhere such as heaven, Plato's perfect realm, or perhaps a more local area in the universe? And is there a distinct nature for logic and mathematics, or for the connections that exist between these realities? These are questions for the philosophers and physicists to ponder and perhaps answer together. But everyone's always working against one another. And I don't think that this is just a coincidence. You know, that's why I'm very excited what's taking place right now in the world. I think that we are finally going to remove the veil. We're going to finally stop fearing what is going to take place and welcome it, and understand that sometimes the universe, Mother Earth, does things for our well-being And although the whole American way has been about this independence, 4th of July, in God we trust, waving the flags, is that in our best interest to separate ourselves from the entire world, to go and look at the elders, the ancient that lived in harmony with this planet, and for us to remove these new programming that have been given to us, because this whole Christianity is 2,000 some years old. That's nothing. That's like a spit compared to the way the ancients have lived.
So Marcy was asking what the Netflix that we're watching, and I told her it's called El Dragon.
Dragon. It's a Spanish.
Dragon.
Yeah, it's a Spanish telenovela, and it's kind of cheesy, but it has a lot of, I don't know.
She said, I'll check it out. Just use English subtitles. They're all over it. We still watch it.
Yeah.
Because contrary to popular belief, we don't know all of the Spanish language. So
we've learned a lot from watching.
We've learned a lot of Mexican.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of words in Mexican that don't necessarily we don't use in the islands and stuff. But it's a very interesting show. It's talking about the immaterial world and the physical world. It does kind of make some connections through, Eastern type beliefs and cultural practices of the Japanese, which goes into more of the immaterial world. It does touch on some of that. So it's interesting because, he's meditating, the lead character, a lot of times. And
they just go by this really different code of conduct than the typical American conduct. Anyway, guys, we're going to go ahead and call it quits. But the whole concept is reality. What you believe reality is very subjective. We have to understand that we are not the only game in town. We're a very young civilization. We think we know it all, with these school system, colleges, we get a little degree, and they put us in these little cubicles afterwards, pushing buttons like a monkey, and we think,
And the thing is that nothing really about this material existence is anything that is able to sustain itself.
Yeah.
Because the cultures of the past, what the Hopis talk about, and other ancient cultures that, have a history on this planet, they speak from experience. They speak about a world in which their human existence thrived on the system that they set up, and they lived in symbiotic relationship with the planet. And we need to understand that our 200, 300-year-old experiment of modern Western civilization has absolutely failed catastrophically, to the point where we are doing things to this planet that were unfathomable. A meteor could not damage this planet as much as we have in a short amount of time. And the thing is, the planet will reset itself, it will correct itself, and things will get back to a sense of what is
balance,
it? Homeostasis. Where we have thrown the planet off, we have rocked even the axis of the planet by what we've done. Probably we have depleted the ozone layers, and we have made this planet hostile to life itself.
And people think it's one big joke, one big hoax, like what's taking place, the global warming and everything that's happening. It's not a joke. It's actual reality. And once you get deep within yourself and you remove yourself from the old programming, from the self-centeredness, individuality, competitive nature that you've been taught to practice, believe, and live, you will start seeing the truth. And hopefully you'll be part of the solution and not the problem.
And we can't fear the things that are coming upon the planet. We have to welcome them. We have to openly understand that these changes are necessary for the evolution of the planet, because the planet is constantly ever transforming itself and changing and becoming a better version of itself, you know. So we need to welcome these changes, and whether they are, you know, political structures being knocked down, or, you know, I mean, the planet's, you know, climate changing, and we need to learn to adapt.
Exactly. And we need to learn to be stewards and not think that everyone's out to get us, that they're taking our freedoms away. By being part of the solution and working together, that's how you really get your true freedom. This whole unreality that's been sold to you as a reality is destructive. And in the end, we don't want to be extinct like the dinosaur. We want to continue forward. We want to work together as a species, as a human family that we are.
I also wanted to just kind of talk just a few moments about the false sense of safety that has been given here in this country. And I just want to let everybody know that really nothing has changed. Nothing has changed with what's been going on the last couple months or so. The world is still in a crisis, and there are still very much. We were watching a video just this morning about a couple that's in Panama, and they still have a 4-hour quarantine that they can use every week in order to get their things and stuff. The world is taking this seriously. Just because we're not doesn't mean that all of a sudden things disappear and goes back to normal, that you could just go shopping and, you know, do whatever you want to do, and congregate in groups and have big sporting events and go to concerts and things like that. Nothing's changed.
You're just putting everybody in danger, because now everyone's out there, and there's just more of a risk of becoming contaminated and hurting one another. And, you know, you can't think of the economy. You have to think of the well-being as a species if we're going to survive, because everything is not about money. You know, everything is not about gold, you know, materialistic things. It's not. And the sooner you understand that, and the sooner you get yourself away from that program, quote unquote, reality, the freer you're going to be. And it's just going to be a sense of peace that will come upon you. Trust the greater good. Trust that the universe knows.
If people get sick, it is going to hurt the economy. I mean, you can't have a good economy with sick people. And what we're doing is we've already been given blueprints as to how we can, you know, mediate and try to control what's happening around us. But if those instructions aren't followed, then we can expect things to get worse.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not going to get better when you have a bunch of people throwing caution to the wind and going out to the restaurants and infecting each other.
Exactly.
So just want to let everybody know that everything's not back to normal,
Right.
although our president seems to think that it is.
Yeah, well, he wants it to be, because he's using this whole thing as a political campaign. And it's I can't wait till he's out of that White House. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and call it quits.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you all new viewers that joined us today. We love you guys. But remember to always love yourselves too. Have a good one. Take care.